Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of From Conflict to Collaboration in the Workplace. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel. It's Chris Angel, and it's Tara Weir. Hello, Tara Weir.
Hello, Chris Angel, not the magician, but better.
But better. I'm older than him. I had the name first. In fact, his name is Italian. His last name is really Italian. And he changed it to Angel, which is like a stage name. But he spent a ton of marketing to give me name recognition, so I'm all for it.
Totally. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Chris Angel. So, Tara, we're talking about, what are we talking about today in this beautiful episode?
Compassion and self-empathy, self-compassion.
What?
Yes, I know.
What? Empathy? Who needs empathy in the workplace?
Yes.
That's for softies. We don't do empathy here.
Yes. Well, you would be surprised how amazing things can come out of situations when there's self-compassion and there's compassion for other.
I already know the answer to this, but I have to put it out there in case anybody's having this thought as they listen to it, right? But like, I hear self-compassion and empathy, and it would be easy to skip over that topic because it's like, yeah, I don't really have time for that. Like, we got to get stuff done. Like, we've got goals this quarter.
Right.
I mean, we can't just sit around and do self-compassion stuff all day. We can't do yoga all day. Like, how do we get any work done? So,
oh my, that's
speak
true.
to that. We'll speak to that for a minute because I'm sure your audience actually is past that. But I do like, even if we're not past it, we're like, I think there's a thing where we get in the go mode and it's easy for that thought process to pop up.
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about is task versus process. And there has to be a healthy balance of both, because you have to have a healthy process in order for your tasks to be done right and done well and done to thrive, right? So, but if you're moving along and there's a bump in the road, that's when we pause and say, okay, what's happening here, right? So just to start this conversation, I think it's great that we get to point out there's the balance of there's a time to just go and do, and then there's a time to pause and say, how are we doing this? Is this working? Can we do this differently?
So the go is the task. Like, I have things to do. We got goals to hit this quarter. That's the task. And then the process is, okay, how are we doing that? And if how I'm showing up to the task isn't from a place of self-compassion and empathy, like I don't feel good in the task because I don't value myself, or I'm not getting my needs met, or whatever, then I'm not going to hit your goal for the quarter anyway, because I've sort of checked out as your team member.
Right. And the reason I wanted to talk about self-compassion and empathy today is because when we start the process of self-awareness and noticing I'm triggered, noticing I'm being driven by unmet needs, or noticing that I'm being pretty judging or blaming, and once we start paying attention to those patterns, it's so easy to get hard on ourselves. It is so easy to be like, oh, there I am again. I did it again, right? Or I'm never going to be able to change this. Or it's just hard because awareness can be uncomfortable because we're noticing ourselves and our patterns, and it isn't necessarily, well, I know it's not our best, right? Yeah. So part of why I wanted to follow up with the show on needs is that the reality is, we have these needs, and we also have a need for self-compassion. When I can be compassionate and understanding to myself about how I'm showing up, then I can often have that for the other person. And that goes so far in creating meaningful workplace connection and relationship and communication. And really it's so funny because it's very easy when we're judging somebody, it's very easy to be on that high ground. But I can guarantee you, whatever it is that person is doing, I've done it before, been there, done that, struggled with that, right? And that's often why we're triggered, is because it is somewhat of a reflection of ourselves. Yeah. So if I'm triggered and I'm not able to have compassion in myself for when I've done that before, then I'm not gonna be able to have it for them. And on the vice versa, if I have understanding for myself and compassion and empathy to say, yeah, I've done that before. I've been really impatient when somebody, if somebody's talking really, really, really slowly and I'm wanting to move along, I might be really frustrated and know that, okay,
Yeah.
well, I just need to be understanding, because there's times when I've had a hard time getting my words out and I've been stuck in my thought, but not able to articulate it.
Mm, mm,
So that
totally.
process of pausing, noticing the trigger, being making a choice to be compassionate with ourselves,
Yeah.
and then identifying the needs that are going on, that process itself will help develop compassion for the other person and understanding. So it's just,
What do we do with it? Like once we notice it, once we see it there, what do we do with what we like? So I have empathy for myself that I forgot something. I have compassion for myself that I messed up again.
right.
And then what do I do with that? Like, do
So
I
it
put it on
doesn't
my to-do
stop
list?
there. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop there. It's like, okay, so I forgot that. Yep. And all right, I have a value around being prompt, and I was late today, and
Mm,
late for our meeting or whatever it is. And I can berate myself about that, or I can
mm,
say, okay, I know that I've been in meetings before and people have shown up late, and I'm okay with that, and it
yeah.
happens. And so I'm going to have the same kind of gentle understanding for myself as I might have for somebody else.
Right.
Well, then I get to say, okay, so what was it that I needed this morning that wasn't working? And that, if I have a value about being on time, then how can I do this differently next time? And I think that's
Mm,
it's like
mm, yeah.
self-inquiry
Good. Yeah.
with kindness. It's like, well, then
Yeah.
how could I maybe do this differently next time? It's the
Mm,
kind of conversation I have with my kids,
mm, yeah.
but it's creating it on inside of ourselves so that we can have self-reflection without self-abuse, right? Without
Right. Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally. I was just thinking, like, if I the same situation, like I show up late, and if I have empathy for myself, I can get into a constructive process. I can say like, okay, how could I do this differently next time, and do it from a place of victory. So next time I do it, and I do it right, I show up on time or whatever the thing is, I actually experience it as a victory, versus if I show up late and I'm in a place of judgment, not empathy,
right.
or self-compassion, then I'm like, see, this is what you do. And then like, I'm just going to add it to my list next time. It creates an anxiousness about it where I'm always worried if I'm going to be late. And if I'm late again, I punish myself. There's one of, right? Like it's
Right.
two paths. It's the same scenario, but if you come from, sounds like you're saying, if you come from empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's like it's making me think of that proverb about the wolf. It's like, which wolf am I going to
Oh,
feed?
right.
And I want to feed the wolf that's
Mm,
celebrating. Okay, I've learned something, and I'm going to
yeah.
do it differently next time. And here's what I'm going to do. And
That's good. Yeah.
so my focus is, all right, I'm going to make sure I'm on time next time because I'm
Mm-hmm.
planning this and that,
Right.
or I've worked in a reminder on my phone, as opposed to
Right.
berating myself about
Right.
being late, because where my attention goes is
Right.
where
Right.
my energy goes.
Yep.
If my energy is going towards frustration and fear of being late, then I'm
Yeah.
more likely continue that pattern versus
Mm,
putting my focus on what it is I want to create. It's the same
yep.
thing in dynamic with another person.
Mm,
I'm putting my attention on the negativity and the judgments and the blaming, then that's what I'll see. But if I put my attention with the intention of connection and the
mm,
intention of wanting to have compassion for that other person and the intention of wanting to collaborate with them,
mm.
then I'm more likely to have that happen because my attention is on that intention.
Love that. So good. So good. I feel like in the workplace setting, I mean, our example of being on time is pretty obvious, or it's pretty like elementary.
Yeah, very much.
And but it was just fine. I'm sure for some people that may even be an issue. And it's just an example where I would imagine for a lot of people, there are even more nuances to, like, the point is, look for you're so good about talking about self-awareness and like noticing triggers and how your body feels. And like, there are things that are probably, you don't even notice, but if you paid attention to your body, you'd be like, oh, there's something happening here. And then you could investigate, observe it, like we talked about in the last episode.
Yes.
And then you could see from whatever it was that was creating that, there's probably some element of self-compassion and empathy that you could give yourself to ease that anxiousness or that feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And then we can reflect from a more solid ground.
Yeah.
Because if I'm reflecting
Right.
from harsh criticism of myself or the other person,
Right.
it's not going to help me move towards that connection and collaboration that I'm looking
Right.
for.
A side note, I'm curious. So how much of this do you feel like is a man versus women conversation? Do you feel like women are more critical of themselves? I sort of feel like as a guy, we'd project more. We're like, I don't do anything wrong and it's always somebody else's fault. I don't know if that's true.
You're kind of setting me up.
Okay. In a good way or a bad way?
Well, I guess
You can plead the fifth. You can plead the fifth.
I'm gonna speak to it, but I'm gonna have a disclaimer. And my
Okay.
disclaimer is that I have not done the research on this, and I have not done the study on the research on this.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
You know,
but I can talk from my experience. And
yeah.
my experience has been that there's some things that are universal that are gender neutral,
Sure.
not specific. Yeah. And then there's certain behaviors that are more gender related. And I would say when it comes to women, the tendency is to lean towards agreeability and to not speak up when there's a difference of opinion or a different need. And it's the deciding that, it's like, it's not worth it. I want to be liked. And there is that bias that when a woman is speaking up, she is seen as less likable. So it's a bind, but that is one area that I would say is gender different.
I think I mean, this is perfect because it just gives empathy and self-compassion even more relevance. Because I feel like if that's the case, then to be like, that could play out where like, I wanted to say something again and I didn't say anything again. Right. And then it's judgment, criticism versus self-compassion and empathy. And I think then how does that, if we really extrapolate that out into then like, how does the team show up as their best self? Well, we're too busy in the middle of our self-judgment to participate as the team.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think there's different ways that being in a diminished state shows up in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's judgment and blame.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's judgment and blame.
Oh yeah.
So maybe I'm blaming that other person and judging them, or maybe I'm blaming and judging myself. And that is neither one is going to create an open dialogue to work through what's going on and identifying those needs and figuring them out so that we can collaborate and both get our needs met.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. I can totally see that when you say it that way, I can see where I have my own judgments about myself and where I feel like I've failed. I just think maybe I'd be curious to see where men and women differ in the environments in which inside of work where they feel judgy of themselves, right? Where they're like, I can only have my own experience on that, but.
Well, Sheryl Sandberg's book addressed the fact that, that we are extremely hard on ourselves as women because we believe we have to be 100% and as close to perfect as possible and don't let them see you sweat and all of these things in order to be seen as credible. So when we don't show up in that very unrealistic, very not human way, then we're really hard on ourselves. And so that's a hard place to come from and be our best. It's like we're arriving at the meeting table with that already going on, then they're not getting our best, and the men aren't getting our best, the women aren't getting our best, the team isn't getting the best.
Did you have a stat the other day? We did our Be Real and Prosper event in Spokane, and I don't know if this was a stat or not, but I feel like there's a stat around how many people show up to work feeling unengaged or not
dissatisfied.
What was that stat?
Yeah, the study was done. It was Business Insider said that 80% of Americans are dissatisfied with their job.
Yeah.
And that's a huge number. And they actually found there's another study that was done that the American Psychological Association said that that one of the top work stressors is the people issues, the ineffective communication, the interpersonal issues.
Yeah, I thought of it because it made me think of if how I experience myself at work comes from a place of self-compassion and empathy, then my experience of work isn't one of as much resistance, You know, like the 80% are unhappy. Like I'm not as unhappy when I have self-compassion.
Yeah.
An environment of compassion doesn't create unhappiness. An environment of perfection creates unhappiness.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, just reminded me of that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you're saying is we have choice. And that's what I help my clients, my individual clients and my teams and my leaders in their teams get to, is that they're able to set some goals and identify some values around how they interact and communicate with each other. And then they have that common language around it so that they can make choices about how they're showing up and how they're responding to each other and how courageous they're being. How vulnerable and real am I being? Am I just being, am I letting that go, or am I really bringing my ideas forward? And am I comfortable in that discomfort of not being aligned, but knowing that there's this respect and trust there. Yeah. So it's, we have a choice around how we show up. And one of the best ways to get empowered is to have compassion for ourselves and to have a kindness around what we're trying to accomplish. So that's where it starts, is that awareness and identification of what do I need, and how can I be understanding to myself, and then how can I approach this person.
So good. So good. So good. And to remind us the kinds of work that you do with teams and companies.
Yeah, I coach individuals and I train groups. I work with teams and their leaders, or I work with an individual on a team, and we explore the topic of communication, trust, credibility, and having how to have those tough conversations. Because truly, if I don't have in some ways a way that I know I'm going to go about approaching a tough subject, then I'm more likely to avoid it.
Right. Yeah.
I'm more likely to avoid it, or I'm more likely to act out and lose my temper, or have a nasty tone, or, and have it show up in a way that doesn't help the team. So I work with a variety of levels and the different roles, and I do it through group work and individual, depending on who wants what kind of work.
It's perfect. If I'm somebody in a company who wants to work with you individually or bring you in to work with my team, what's the best, where do I start? How do I start that with you?
They can go to my website, which is powerfulconnectionsnow.com. And on there, there's a button, and they can click on that, and that will set them up to get an email to me so we can schedule a discovery Zoom call. And those are complimentary. I just like to talk first, explore with each other what's going on for them, and is it something that I can help them with? Are we a fit? And then from there, we determine our plan. But I love to start with just talking with people and hearing what's going on for them.
Yeah, it's perfect. And it's not just complimentary, it's also confidential, right?
Very much.
I would imagine some people would be like, I don't know if I want to talk to somebody. Like, is this private? Is this,
Yeah. Well,
because it's a very touchy subject.
It is, absolutely. And I actually have an organization where I've worked with a ton of people in that organization, and confidentiality is incredibly important. So I did a personality test not too long ago, maybe about 6 months, year ago, and it showed me as that I am on alert, and that I am, it was my two tops were trust and safety. So like I can be trusted, bottom line. And that's important to me, is having that confidentiality, because that's a value of mine too.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I feel very safe with you. I feel like you definitely are a safe person.
Good.
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff. So Powerful Connections Now, you guys can schedule time with Tara there, complimentary and confidentially. Powerful Connections Now. Yeah. Tara, great stuff. Thank you. I look forward to, hey, listen, to those of you listening, Tara and I would like to know what else you are experiencing in the workplace. Like, here's a great, like, Tara and I were talking before we hit record, like, if we knew what you were really working on, or what you wanted us to provide perspective on, we would love to do that through the show. Like, let us know, like, private message Tara.
Yes.
Let her know of some of the things that either your team is wrestling with confidentially, right? We won't out you on a show like so-and-so from this company said this was what they sucked about, what sucked about their team. But we'll just, there's no outing. You're very safe with us, but we'd love to create content for you and your team through this show. So definitely reach out, private message Tara that way.
Yes, please. That'd be awesome.
All right, Tara, thanks again. We'll catch you next time. Until then, take care.